Thank you, Lubbock. How you all doing? Good to be with you, and thank you for coming out on a Sunday under this beautiful sky, where the wind has died down a little bit. Thank God. We just drove down from Amarillo, and Cynthia, our driver, was behind the wheel of the van, and it was swaying back and forth. And I promise you, she had not had a drop to drink. She does not drink on Sunday mornings, but it was the wind, and we know your wind because we live in El Paso, Texas, where we also get it. Do I have any people from El Paso? El Chuco, I've got one in the house. Anybody heard of El Paso? Yeah, okay, good. Well, it's great to be with you, and we're really grateful that you're here, that you came out to be with us. I mentioned that we were just in Amarillo, Texas, where we had a great town hall last night, beautiful Saturday evening, and folks from all over the Panhandle came out to join us to have a conversation about the future of the state of Texas. It was wonderful. Prior to that, we had been in Dalhart, Texas, and prior to that, in Canadian, Texas. And I don't know if anybody's ever been to Shamrock, Texas, but I got to go there on their St. Patrick's Day Festival, which was yesterday, which was awesome, 75th anniversary. And we happened to luck out and be there. They also happen to have a pretty good record store, Spinning Jenny's. If you're ever in Shamrock, go support your local independent record seller there. We're going everywhere, listening to everyone, talking to everyone, listening to everyone, making sure that no one is written off and no one is taken for granted, because this moment calls for all of us. And we don't care, no me importa, if you're a Republican. If you're a Republican and you're here, you are welcome. Democrats, we want to see you as well. Independents, we need more of you in our lives right now. All of us in Texas, welcome to be here, because all of us in Texas need to get this state on the right track. I like that. Out of many, one. There you go. There you go. I want to thank Gracie for introducing us and bringing us together. I want to thank Commissioner Flores for being here again and always coming out and supporting us. I want to thank the County Treasurer, Chris, who lent me his Texas Tech hat. That's big. That's really big. And so thank you for that. Yeah, guns up. We see this all over the Panhandle in West Texas. And listen, we know there are a lot of good El Pasoans going to Tech, so when you see them, be kind to them. They're good people, I promise you. And we have a very special relationship with Tech, as you know. We have the University Medical Center in El Paso, Texas, and the Texas Tech Paul L. Foster 4-year School of Medicine in our community. When I was a member of Congress, I was lucky enough to serve on the House Veterans Affairs Committee, trying to have the back of every man, every woman who put their life on the line for this country. But we were struggling with connecting those veterans with the care that they deserved, that they earned, and that they needed. Veterans who come back from World War II and Korea who are still struggling with getting an appointment at the VA. Folks who came back from Vietnam with post-traumatic stress disorder, and it had been 50 years since they'd even thought about getting treatment, but now that they had retired, now that their kids were out of the house, they were struggling with some of these issues, and they couldn't get the help that they needed. I actually came up to Lubbock, I drove here to meet with veterans and with those at Texas Tech who are banding together to connect those veterans with the care that they needed. I took the lessons learned from Lubbock and I brought them back to El Paso. And I reached out to the Texas Tech 4-year Medical School President, Richard Lang, in El Paso, and I said, look, out of 148 mental health care centers in the VA system nationally, El Paso ranks 148. We have veterans whose care delayed has become care denied, and who are literally dying from this. How do we turn this around? And Richard said, you know what? I've got 19 mental health care professionals who are on my payroll. I would love to extend their services to each and every veteran here in the city of El Paso. We partnered between Texas Tech and the VA in El Paso. We got local business and civic and medical leaders involved, and we turned that VA around. No longer 148 in the nation. We're now improving until we become the best in the United States of America and ensure every veteran gets that care that they need. And so much of that goodness came from Tech. And from the people who are innovative, being creative, and making sure that we fulfill our commitments to one another. Now, that is something that any Republican, any Democrat, any independent should be able to get behind. The issues that bring us together, I would argue, are far greater and stronger and more powerful than anything that might divide us at this moment. In this highly polarized, fractured state, where we're having a hard time listening to one another, seeing the best in one another, trusting each other so that we can get back to the big things, like, let me lay 3 on you. And I hear these all over the state of Texas. In fact, I was just at the Stripes down the street, and I asked the young woman behind the counter, I introduced myself. She'd never heard of me, which was awesome, because I need to meet those people who aren't engaged or invested in politics right now. And I said, you know, what's important to you? What would you like to see in your next governor? And she said, you know, I'm just not into politics. I just really don't care. And I said, that's fine. I'm not asking you in terms of politics or Democrats or Republicans. What would you like to see better for yourself? And she said, for myself, well, I don't know. But for my 1-year-old daughter, I want to make sure that when she's my age, she earns more than I do. She has an easier time if she's working full-time, putting food on the table and a roof over her head. I want to make sure that she has the best public school in the world that she can go to right here in the city of Lubbock. She said, so I don't know if that's a Democrat or a Republican thing. I don't know who you are, Beto O'Rourke, but if you win this, I hope that you'll focus on that. And it's interesting because whether she's politically engaged or not, she's reflecting what I'm hearing in every community, every one of the 254 counties of Texas. We all want to make sure that the best jobs being created in the United States of America right now are found in the state of Texas. And if you're willing to work full-time, you should not have to work a second or a third job just to make ends meet, right? The minimum wage of $7.25 an hour just is not going to cut it, not for any of us, no matter where we live. This second issue that the young woman behind the counter at Stripes brought up, look, I know that we have the best educators anywhere in the country. I know we have the smartest kids, bar none. I know we have the most caring and loving parents, and yet our schools are not performing to their true potential. Check this fact out. 7 out of 10 fourth graders are not able to read at grade level in the state of Texas. 70%. Now, that cannot be a reflection on those teachers or those kids or those parents or us as Texans. It has to be something else. And when I dig into the data, I find this. The average educator in the city of Lubbock is underpaid by $14,000 a year against the average educator nationally. $14,000 just to get to even with what folks are making in Oklahoma, in Illinois, in New York, in California. Why not pay teachers their true value and worth right here in the state of Texas? I guarantee you, we'd be able to keep more teachers in the classroom. We'd be able to attract more teachers into the profession. And if we take this next step of treating our retired teachers with the respect that they are owed. They have not been paid a cost of living adjustment since 2004. Let's make sure they get one every year going forward. They're going to be able to tell their grandsons and granddaughters, this is a profession where you can really make a difference. Answer that call to public service, and you will also be treated with respect in your retirement when you're on a fixed income. And then this last idea, you know, that reading retention and ability to read at grade level in 4th grade, you can't fix it in 4th grade. You cannot fix it in 3rd grade. You got to start when that kiddo is 3 or 4 years old. So how about universal pre-K all day in the state of Texas for every kid? Then we're cooking with gas. This last idea that I hear almost everywhere is that we all want to be healthy enough and well enough to live to our full potential, to finish our education, to start a business, to raise our families, to do whatever we were placed on this planet to do in the first place. But we right now live in the least insured state in the United States of America. That means far too many are literally dying of diabetes, of curable cancers, of the flu in the year of our Lord 2022 in the wealthiest, most powerful, most medically advanced country the world has ever known. It's unconscionable, it's immoral, and ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to make the case today that it's also incredibly expensive. Because when that person who has diabetes but cannot afford insulin and who now has glaucoma finally succumbs to the pain and the pressure and takes herself to that hospital and that emergency room, the outcomes are not going to be as good as if she'd been able to go in and get preventative care and treat that with insulin along the way. It's also going to be more expensive. Is it $50,000, $100,000, $150,000? Who knows? It depends on how bad it has become for her. But if she doesn't have a dime in her pocket, and if she's not eligible for Medicaid or private insurance, she's not going to be able to pay that bill. But you and I, and every property taxpayer in every county in the state of Texas, anyone lucky enough to have health insurance to begin with, and that's all you are in my mind, is lucky if you have it right now, you will be paying more to cover the costs that she was unable to bear. If we took yes for an answer and accepted Medicaid expansion in the state of Texas, we bring in $10 billion a year additional. Our tax dollars are going to DC coming back home. We connect more people with care. We attract more providers into our communities. Lubbock and the Panhandle above us are a maternity health care desert in the state of Texas. Very hard for women to connect with care in the state. Made even harder after 7 years of Greg Abbott shutting down reproductive health care for every woman in the state of Texas. So one thing we can all get behind is making sure that more of us, and I mean by the millions, can see a doctor, fill that prescription, see a mental health care provider in a state whose largest provider of mental health care right now is the county jail system. There's a better way to do this, and you don't have to be a Democrat to see it. You just have to be a Texan to understand it. So those three ideas, right? I like that. I like that. Those three ideas. When you leave here and you talk to that family member, that neighbor, that classmate, that colleague, and they say, what's this Beto guy all about? Well, he talked about great jobs, world-class schools, and the ability to see a doctor. That's what he wants to do when we elevate him, and all of us by extension, into this position of public trust and power. That's what he's going to focus on. And listen, this is the contrast that I want to make sure that we also all understand. Last night in Amarillo, after we finished a conversation just like this one, a young woman came up to me, and she said, hey Beto, I heard you talking about the foster care system. Well, I was 11 years old, and I was at a softball game that I was playing in, and a CPS caseworker came and took me from my family in front of my teammates and everybody there in the stands. It was a really traumatic experience for me. She then talked about the privatization of the foster care system in the state of Texas, some of the trauma that she experienced along the way, and I listened to her and I understood better some of the challenges that we face in that program. There are 30,000 Texas kids in the foster care system today. In the last 2 years, 23 of them have died, have lost their lives within our custody and our care. More than 200 of them have been trafficked, their bodies rented for sex in this state by people who are unspeakably evil. And it's not like this is something that caught us by surprise. 6 years ago, a district court judge, Judge Jack, said, kids who enter the foster care system leave it more damaged than when they first came in. Governor Abbott, you got to fix this. This was 6 years ago. There was court order after court order until this last January, just a couple of months ago. She once again issues from the bench a statement that says, the situation in our foster care system has gone from bad to worse. Kids are dying, kids are getting trafficked, kids are sleeping in the hallways, on top of the desks, and underneath them in CPS offices. This is something that Greg Abbott knew about and has done nothing to improve. And instead of focusing on the problem, he wants to scare you about transgender kids. He wants to turn in the parents of those kids and take those kids away from a loving home, as well as every other child in the household. Talk about mixed up priorities. When you look at Medicaid, he's known for not just 7 years, but for all the time he was Attorney General as well. That those were our federal dollars coming back to us if we would just take yes for an answer. That we have people who are dying and succumbing to illnesses that could have been cured if we'd just taken yes for an answer and the money from DC. But he didn't do it. He's known it all along. And he's done nothing. And the question is why? I mean, we should be careful in ascribing motive. But is it that he's more interested in his hold on political power, on his re-election, on his performance in the Republican primary, than he is in the welfare and well-being of the average Texas family. And then there's this one. In the energy capital of planet Earth, we could not keep the lights on, or the heat running, or the water flowing last February in the state of Texas. 700 people lost their lives. They froze to death under their covers, out in their trucks. Some were burned alive as they started fires in their apartments and their homes, trying to stay warm in this state. Because the governor had been warned for years that we had vulnerabilities in the grid, and he chose to do nothing. And even after what happened last February, he has still failed to winterize the grid. He still allowed people who took $11 billion in illegal profits over 5 days in February to keep that money, and has forced all of us to pay more in our utility bills, on average $45 a month, looking out for his cronies and his donors instead of the people of Texas. Again, we got to be careful in describing motive, but if that is not corruption, I don't know what is, because he's taking $1 million campaign contributions from the same people who stole this money from the state of Texas. This is the contrast we have. All of us get behind great jobs, world-class schools, the ability to see a doctor, or someone who has defined leadership in this state by corruption and incompetence and cruelty to the most vulnerable among us. That is the choice before us right now. And how we act with this choice before us will define us not just in the year 2022, but through our kids and grandkids and the generations yet to come, forever going forward. So I call upon you, Republican, Democrat, Independent alike, Texan before you are anything else, to join this campaign in this cause, to reach out to those voters, just like that young woman working behind the counter at the Stripes that I met today, and invite them into this election and into our democracy, and give them, in your own words, from your own heart, a reason to vote and to participate. Because this state is not red, certainly is not blue. It is more non-voting than it is anything else. And if we together will reach out to those non-voters and give them a reason to participate, we are going to win this race, and I will serve you as the next governor of the great state. Thank you all for being on here today. Cynthia Connell has got an extra microphone, so we're going to turn this mic that I've got over to you. Anyone with a question, with a comment, with an idea, even I hope some constructive criticism.
What about Texas Guard?
The question, we'll take this first question, and then we just ask going forward that you raise your hand. The question was, what about the Texas Guard? I talk about how this governor tries to scare you, about the people who are coming to get you, or the kid who'll be in your child's bathroom at public school. He's also trying to scare us about the border. And look, we have some real challenges there. And we need to do a far better job as a state and as a country meeting the challenges of illegal drug trafficking and human smuggling. And when I'm governor, we're going to focus on that. But we're not going to scare each other about immigrants, about refugees, about asylum seekers. We're not going to, as he did on the eve of the El Paso shooting, ask you to defend yourself and take matters into your own hands. And someone did just that at a Walmart on the 3rd of August in 2019. And we certainly won't activate 10,000 members of the Guard who have served this country with honor and distinction in Afghanistan and Iraq, who were activated in 2017 when Hurricane Harvey dumped more rain on this state than any time in recorded history, and who are now being asked to be part of some political theater, a solution in search of a problem. 4 of those Guard members have taken their own lives in just the last 5 months. 2 others have died in accidental deaths, none of them harmed by anybody coming into this country seeking a better life right now. Let's bring these Guard members home, back to their families, back to their careers, and only activate them when we have a true crisis and need for their service going forward. All right, Cynthia, take my...
Can't hear you.
And I gave you a promise that I will be out there working for you and supporting you. And I stand behind my promise. I don't break promise. But since you're here today, I didn't give up my church just to come see you. I gave because I wanted to make sure that you get all the support you need. You're going to So you let me know what you want me to do. I'm ready to knock on doors. I'm ready to walk the block for this time around. I know that you're going to win. I know you.
I just asked her if she would get in the van with us and travel the rest of this state. Thank you so much. This is the spirit of the campaign right now. And you're willing to do your part. I'm willing to do my part. If each of us does our part, we cannot help but win this thing. Thank you for being the example we need right now. Grateful to you.
Just before we do our next question, if you've not signed in, please make sure to do so. The sign-in table is back there. See her waving her hand? There you go. We can even come to you. So if you raise your hand, we can make sure to come to you.
And Chrissy, who was waving her hand with the sign-in sheet, is a graduate from Texas Tech right here. So, proud of you.
Mine is more of an opinion, you know, and I'm always about being decisive. And I was decisive from the get-go when it first came out, the first time in Lubbock. But me, I always think of the potential and the possibilities of what we all can become. And I see the kind of space that you are coming from. And even though I might look young, I'm old. You know, I've been here for a while. And I recall, you know, a guy who ran before. That's why I was out here saying, why? Why? Because you made me think about this great American. And Robert Kennedy said, some people see things as they are. And that's why. But Beto see things that never were. And he's asking, why not?
All right, I will make my way around the room. Here's our next question.
My name is David. I've been suffering from mental illness since 2005. I finally turned the corner last fall without help of the state of Texas. Do I have your word as an Irishman that you're going to fix this?
David, will you say the first part of your question? I'm so sorry.
I've been dealing with mental illness since 2005. The state of Texas has not helped me. It has hindered me. I have a problem with that. And if you're going to fix things, do you promise as an Irishman that you'll fix it?
Yes, sir. I do. I do.
Sir, I'm originally from New York and I'm a Scotsman.
Thank you for being here, for asking that. Listen, folks, we rank 50th, dead last in the nation for the ability to see a mental health care provider. There were two people that I met yesterday, one in Dalhart, one in Amarillo, both of whom lost siblings to mental health care challenges, who took their own lives just in the last year. We're seeing this all over the state of Texas right now. We've got to connect more people with the care that they need that is literally going to keep them alive and that will also allow them to live to their full promise. And when they do, imagine the things they're going to do for all of us. The jobs that they're going to create, the property taxes that they're also paying so it lessens the burden on all of us. The amazing art that they're going to produce that is going to enlighten us and make our lives that much better. But if we don't make these investments right now, we're going to lose those opportunities. And frankly, I know this is tough to say, but we don't talk about it enough. We're also going to lose them. Lose far too many of them. So the gentleman has my commitment. You all have my commitment to turning this around. We can no longer be 50th. We got to be #1 in access in the country.
In regards to the children that were separated from their families, can we get some accountability for that? Find out what's going on.
There were hundreds, maybe thousands of children who were literally taken from their parents in 2017, 2018, under this so-called zero tolerance policy at the United States-Mexico border. We know that those kids came with their parents on a 2,000-mile journey, a lot of it on foot, some of it on top of, not inside of, a train known as the Beast or La Bestia. And then when you get here, having fled certain death, brutality, all of the unimaginable things that will cause you to take a journey like that. No one does it for kicks. No one does it to come here and take anything from anyone else. They do it because it's the only way to keep your kid alive. I just traveled the last 2 days with my 11-year-old in the comfort of a truck with my wife. That's hard enough. Imagine doing 2,000 miles, a lot of that on foot, and arriving here, a stranger in a strange land, and then this. You finally get here, and that child for whom you're willing to risk your life is literally taken from your arms. You don't speak the language, you don't know the law, you yourself are deported back 2,000 miles to the very country from which you fled, and that child is placed, God only knows where. Cynthia and I have been in the room when some of these families have been reunited, and you would think it would be a moment of extraordinary joy, and it is not. That kid has already been through so much trauma, and they associate that trauma with their parent who brought them here, and instead of that big hug and tears rolling down the cheeks of that kid, you just see this vacant look, and can I trust you again, given what we just went through? But there are still hundreds of kids who have not been reunited with their parents, because we still have not found them. And so we've got to do whatever it takes in going back into these Northern Triangle countries of Central America to locate these parents to whom we've done such extraordinary damage and make sure they're connected with their kids wherever they are here in the United States, and then commit ourselves to never doing this again to any human being, no matter the reason. So whatever we can do at a state level to assist the federal government in this relocation and reunification, we will do. And you got my commitment on that. Thanks for asking.
All right, here's our next question. One issue that I feel like sometimes gets pushed under the rug is the environmental racism that takes place in Texas. In my neighborhood, there's a truck center called the Edgewater Truck Center. There's exhaust and there's a lake full of everything just gets thrown in, and that's like part of my neighborhood, really across the street. And I just feel that sometimes it doesn't get addressed, especially under Abed, who like even advocates for these big industrial factories and stuff, and I feel like that's not addressed.
Thanks for asking the question. The question's about, the environment and the injustice in terms of how those who are polluting and emitting toxins into the environment are regulated, and even where that emission and that pollution is taking place, in whose neighborhood. Who's bearing the brunt of this? Where do we have cancer clusters across the state of Texas? Which water systems is it unsafe to drink the water from across the state of Texas? There are more unsafe water systems in this state than there are in any other. When you have a Texas Commission on Environmental Quality that is literally captured by the corporations that it is supposed to oversee and regulate, the average citizen, the average resident does not have a shot. When I'm governor, I want to make sure that we appoint people to the TCEQ who only have one interest in mind, and that is yours and the public health. We can have industry and business and economic success in the state at the same time that we protect the soil and the air and the water of the state of Texas. This is our natural heritage. It belongs to all of us, and we got to make sure that we pass it on better than we found it. When I'm governor, we're going to do that together, and I'm looking forward to having your help. Thank you.
All right, we're in the same area.
Hey King, I just want to know how you intend on ensuring that queer voices are not only heard but amplified.
Thank you for asking. We're going to remind everybody in Texas that not only is this a very big state, 254 counties, but it is big enough for all of us, and big enough for us to be proud of everyone who is in it. Right now you have a governor who is targeting same-sex partners. I mentioned that CPS crisis and 30,000 kids in foster care. It is legal in the state of Texas, although it is immoral, to deny placement to a family based on the fact that they're same-sex parents. It is legal, although it is immoral in the state of Texas, to fire somebody because of their sexual orientation. It is legal not to hire them in the first place because they are gay. And this war on transgender kids, I don't have to tell anyone who's a family member of a transgender child what that does to that kid and to that family, who are already at high risk for self-harm and even worse. And that is exacerbated when you have the most powerful man in the state saying that you are public enemy number one, and that we're going to turn in your parents and we're going to take you away from that loving household. We're going to stop doing these harmful things, but also, to your point, we're going to begin speaking with pride about the people who make Texas such a special place. We're going to amplify their voices and their stories, and we're going to attract and retain the talent that's going to make us an even better place going forward. Thanks for asking.
to attract new and young teachers to the education system. Valuing and supporting veteran teachers is a major issue. I'm coming to the end of my 14th year of education, and I've made the decision to leave. And what are your plans to support those teachers who have been in it and doing the hard work in order to keep them there?
First of all, we are all grateful for your public service and your choice of career. You did not get into this for the money, or the glory, or the fame. It's one of the hardest things we can ask anybody to do, and you answered a true calling and became part of a cause more than anything else. You care about those kids, and for anyone who's got a kid in school right now, or who's a family member of a teacher, or themselves is an educator, you understand that in addition to classroom instruction, so learning to read and to write and to add up the numbers, these teachers and educators are literally keeping kids alive right now. After 2 years of the pandemic, in a state that has lost more than 80,000 people, a lot of these kids lost a grandparent or a family member. Their folks might have lost their job during recession. They've been through some pretty unimaginable, for those of us who grew up in the 70s and 80s, trauma that we can only do our best to help out with. Those teachers are the lifeline for those kids. You are the lifeline for those kids in that classroom. We cannot afford to lose you. I'm going to do everything I can if you leave to bring you back, because we lose 1/3 of new teachers within their first 5 years that they enter the profession. 2/3 of current Texas teachers, just like you, are thinking about leaving right now. The high stakes, the high pressure in that classroom, exacerbated by a STAR test that adds even more high stakes and high pressure. If I were governor right now, I would cancel that STAR test. Because that standardized test in no way measures your value or the potential of that kid, or what you're trying to do, which is to unlock their lifelong love of learning. Once you ignite that, there is no stopping that kiddo from anything that they want to do over the course of their life. But when you're asked to spend the majority of your school day preparing for a standardized test that you will be graded on, and your school will receive an A through an F letter grade, that's not doing anybody any good. The only person who's doing well are the test-making companies who are making extraordinary profits off the taxpayers in Texas. So job number one when I'm governor is to listen to you, to appoint an educator as TEA commissioner in the state of Texas, and to make sure that we get you back in the classroom and we're working for your public service. Thank you for being here for what you do.
All right, right down the middle.
Thank you.
Hey, Beto, thanks. It's a pleasure to work for you. 2 things that Abbott stands for, and you say you're going to change. How will you change? Voters' rights and pro-choice.
Yeah.
You know, I talked about veterans at the outset, and I see by their caps we've got Vietnam-era veterans, veterans who served during other periods of this nation's engagement with the rest of the world. Now, they swore an oath not to the person in the Oval Office or even to a political party, but to the Constitution, our way of life, our form of government, this great democracy. And this great democracy here in Texas that they swore to defend, and some have lost their lives in so doing, is under the greatest attack that we have ever seen. We're seeing ballot rejection rates for those requesting mail-in ballots in some counties of 30 and 40, and even early in the election, the primary, 50%. Tens of thousands of our fellow Texans who attempted to vote were functionally disenfranchised just this year based on the voter suppression bill that Greg Abbott signed into law last year. And to put a point on it, 95-year-old veteran, our fellow Texan, a voter, and I don't know if he's a Republican or a Democrat because it doesn't matter. This is a guy who fought fascism half a world away and tried to defend it here at home, and had his ballot by mail request rejected not once, not twice, but 3 times. If that guy cannot vote in the state of Texas, we really have a problem. So, when I'm governor, we're going to make sure that for any citizen who's eligible to vote, there is no obstacle in your way. We're going to try to make sure that there's online voter registration finally in the state of Texas. Election day as a state holiday. Same-day voter registration. Automatic voter registration. We're going to reopen the more than 700 polling places that have been closed across this state of Texas. And we're going to go from near dead last in voter turnout to, I hope, being first. Because because we love this democracy, and as a proud, lifelong, fourth-generation Texan, I would argue we love it more than anyone else. This second issue that you mentioned, not only did Greg Abbott sign a bill that outlaws abortion in the state of Texas, and I don't know if you caught the press conference when he was signing it, he looked like a deer in the headlights. The reporter said, Governor, you know that this bill prohibits abortion in all instances, including rape and incest. And the governor doesn't know what to say, and he says, well, we're going to eliminate rape in the state of Texas. The clearance for violent crimes, including rape, since Greg Abbott has been governor, has declined from 70% to 50%. We're bringing fewer prosecutions, fewer people to justice, more victims who do not have that resolution and peace of mind that they deserve and that we should be able to provide in the state of Texas. But in addition to denying women their constitutional right to make their own decisions about their own bodies, we are worsening a maternal mortality crisis in this state that is 3 times as deadly for black women in the state of Texas. Because when you close down a reproductive health care center, you also make it harder for a woman to get a cervical cancer screen, to get reproductive health care help of any kind, or to see a doctor in the least insured state in the country. So I think we can find common ground, not just with Democrats, but with Republicans as well, to ensure that every woman in Texas makes her own decisions about her own body, her own future, and her own health care going forward. That's the right thing to do. I think every Texan can get behind that.
Lubbock has so many good questions and so many hands up. I'm going to try to get to as many of you as I can.
Thank you. I have 2 comments. One is my daughter was a CPS worker down in Austin, and it was no joke. She was having to go into an office building and watch kids all night because that's where they put the kids that nobody wanted. And that's going on full time. I mean, it's right down the street from the Capitol. We have kids sleeping on the floor under desks at the CPS office. It's terrible, and it's a full-time thing going on. She quit. She couldn't take it. My second thing is I work in an elementary school, and I'm so worried about this banning books, banning what we can teach our children, critical race theory, history, the real history. And I want it to change. We shouldn't be banning things. Our kids need to know the right thing in their history.
I just saw a story about a Texas librarian who was fired this last week for refusing to take books out of her library. She said, these aren't my books, these aren't the government's books, these books belong to the people of this community, and if they want the freedom to choose the book that they're going to read, they should have that. This is the United States of America. It is crazy that this is happening, but it's not unconnected to the attack on our democracy or the attack on women, which, by the way, is not about pro-life, it is about power and control over other people right now. And on this issue of history, how can we ask teachers to stay in the classroom when not only they underpaid in Lubbock by $14,000, but they find themselves under attack by the governor, who's also asking them to turn in the parents of transgender kids in the classroom? This is crazy. And listen, on the issue of history, no state has a more interesting, and I would argue, essential history than the state of Texas. 2 quick examples. 100 years ago, literally 1923, the state of Texas, through its legislature and governor, bans black Texans from being able to vote in elections. It was called the White Primary Law. And if you were African American in the state of Texas, you could not vote in 1923, 1924, all the way up until 1944. While black men were giving their lives overseas to defend this democracy, they could not vote in it here in the state of Texas. It wasn't how many jelly beans are in the jar before I allow you to register to vote. It wasn't, grandfather clauses and voter disenfranchisement by other names. It was literally written in black and white in state statute. That happened in the state of Texas. If we don't understand that and know that history, we are very liable to repeat it again as you see this new Jim Crow tactic being used against voters in the state of Texas in 2022. My other story, and I'm proud of this one. It's a young woman named Thelma White, all of 18 years old, who in 1954 graduated from the all-black Douglas High School in El Paso, Texas, the only high school she was allowed to attend as its valedictorian. She had the audacity and courage to try to enroll in Texas Western College, now known as the University of Texas at El Paso. She, of course, was rejected solely based on the color of her skin. Mind you, she was the valedictorian at her high school. She then had the additional courage and persistence and perseverance to enlist the aid of a little-known attorney you may or may not have heard of named Thurgood Marshall, who took her case to the Western District Court in El Paso, where the judge there not only found in her favor that she should be able to attend Texas Western, but integrated all public higher education in the state of Texas, including right here in Lubbock. If she, at the age of 18, as a child who just graduated from one of our public high schools, was strong enough to lead that fight, then our kids today are strong enough to learn her history. And what I'm going to make sure that we all do.
So I came to Lubbock at the beginning of the pandemic from Austin. One of my favorite things about Austin, forgive me, is the University of Texas, where one of their most popular ads was, "What starts here changes the world." I felt that way about Texas as a whole since we moved here in 2000. One of the things that I find problematic about the U.S. government and Texas government is no term limits. How do we fix term limits? The average Texan is 36 years old. The average government official is 61. I find that to be problematic. How do you fix that?
Let me just informal poll. How many of you are in favor of term limits? I would say a pretty clear majority. And I think that majority is reflected across the state of Texas, throughout the United States. But if I were to ask this same question within the state house chambers and state senate chambers, I think we'd have no hands go up. The folks in power love that power. They'll do everything they can to keep that power, including drawing themselves in to additional power. The congressional districts drawn in the state of Texas are so uncompetitive because it's members of Congress choosing their voters instead of the other way around. And they'll serve for the duration of their natural life if we allow them to do that, but we don't have to allow them to do that. We can campaign on term limits for governor, for state reps, for anyone who holds any position of public trust and power in the state of Texas. We want that turnover. We believe in the 29 million of our fellow Texans. We know that as good an idea as Beto might have, there's someone out there who's going to have an even better one. Let him do his time in public service and then get out of the way and have somebody else be elevated to take that on. It's also the only way, whether it's in age or demographics or anything else, that our government is going to start to look like the people it purports to serve. So yes on term limits going forward. Thank you. Thanks, Don.
So we have obvious gridlocks in legislation at the state and the federal level. What items are you most willing to negotiate with on the Republican side? And then for items that can't be negotiated, what are the first few items you would solve through executive action?
Thanks for asking this question. Listen, I know a little bit about this from having served in the United States Congress for 6 years, every year as a member of the minority. Only way I was going to get anything done was by finding common ground, consensus, and I know this is a dirty word in America right now, but compromise as well. So when I wrote a bill to expand mental health care access for veterans, for example, I submitted it to my colleagues on the House Veterans Affairs Committee. They didn't like the original draft. They added their ideas, took out some of mine. I agreed to those, but we got it passed in both chambers. And the one human being with whom I agree on almost nothing, Donald J. Trump, signed that bill into law. So we can find a way to get the job done, even if we think there isn't a lot of agreement mutually between us. Those three items I started with, jobs, great schools, the ability to see a doctor, I know that most Texans agree with them, and I even know there is bipartisan support now among elected Republicans. The bill to expand Medicaid, for example, is a compromise bill. It's probably not my ideal bill, but it was written in such a way that it can draw Republican support. It has some of the most onerous work requirements, for example. It's a very conservative variation of Medicaid expansion, but you know what? That's better than doing nothing at all. And if we allow the perfect to become the enemy of the good, then we're going to have that stalemate going forward. And I think as Americans, we're sick and tired of that. So Medicaid expansion is a great example of that. On the minimum wage, I think $7.25 is far too low. Anyone who's making $7.25 thinks it's far too low. I think Republicans are going to be open to an argument. They may not want to raise the minimum wage as high as I want to raise it, but I think we can probably find some consensus on that issue as well. On the other issue of schools, we find in rural communities that are almost exclusively represented by Republicans, the independent school district is the largest employer. It's the most important institution in that community. It is a source of pride for that town. I know those Republican lawmakers want to ensure their teachers, their constituents are paid just as well as the teachers in other states across this country. I think this is another area of common ground. So those three things right there are places where I think we can find consensus. But I want to bring up one other that I think is on many people's minds, and Malachi, who I had a chance to meet as I just came in, I know it's on his mind as well. He asked me about my views on the Second Amendment. You all know that after 23 of my neighbors were killed by someone with an AK-47 in 2019, I came out and said that no one in civilian life should have one of these weapons that was originally designed for use on a battlefield. That high-impact, high-velocity round, it destroys everything inside of it, right? Now, I respect the fact that some here own AR-15s, AK-47s, and they use them responsibly. They're not going to use them against our fellow human beings. And they may disagree with the point of view that I have on this. I hear you on that. It's the beauty of our democracy is we can disagree civilly and peacefully. That is probably, to the gentleman's question, not going to be something we can start with when I'm governor, especially if there's a Republican majority legislature. So where do we find common ground on the Second Amendment? Let's make sure that we protect your right to have firearms, but we do a better job of protecting the lives of the people in our community. So, universal background checks, which means if you buy a firearm in the state of Texas, there's going to be some vetting to make sure that you're not going to harm yourself or someone else in our community. I know gun owners and non-gun owners alike can get behind that one. That's a place to start. Safe storage laws, so that a young child cannot pick up a gun that was unintentionally left, not locked up, and use it and maybe hurt themselves or a sibling or somebody at their school. We could probably get behind that. Extreme risk protection orders, where if someone is displaying threatening behavior, they're going to hurt someone in their lives or in their school, we make sure that that firearm is taken from them before it's too late. Those are things that are not the purview of one party or another, but most of us agree on. They're common sense pieces of legislation. And the last thing, what the governor did last year by signing permitless carry into law is not in keeping with the best traditions of responsible gun ownership in Texas. Listen, I support a license to carry program where you can carry a gun in public if you have gone through a background check, if you've had some firearms training so we know that you know how to use that gun. But allowing anyone to carry a loaded weapon in public when more cops have been gunned down in the state of Texas than any other state. It's why police and sheriffs argued with the governor, pleaded with him, please do not sign this into law. It's going to make our job harder. It's going to make life as a cop deadlier, and it's going to make it more difficult to protect the people that we serve in our communities. He turned his back on them and did it nonetheless. When I'm governor, we're going to repeal that and get back to that proud tradition of responsible gun ownership in the state of Texas. So thanks for asking the question.
To address the issue of environment, since the infrastructure bill passed, and that should bring money into Texas, in order to have environmentally friendly items, for instance, I'm just giving an example, for an EV car. I'm not necessarily for EV car unless there's also a way to make it sustainable. In other words, that battery's going to run out. So if that company's going to make cars, that company also needs to be recycling the batteries, for instance, on that car. Otherwise, it doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, your environment is going to be polluted, even further. So I think we need to think ahead, not just get off gas, but we need to think how that's going to impact the environment.
Thank you for saying that. We got to explore the unintended consequences of decisions that were made with the best of intentions going forward, like electrifying our transportation system. And I think there's a lot of hope and a lot of promise and a lot of jobs connected to that we want to have here in Texas. But we also have to have the oversight and the regulation, both in how we extract the resources that we use to produce these electric cars and in how we dispose of those things once we no longer need them. We've got to have a plan for that as well. But then I think we also have extraordinary opportunity to expand our energy leadership not just in oil and gas, but wind, which we currently lead in, and should expand that lead. Solar, we should be the capital of solar. Hydrogen, geothermal, and storage technologies for what we produce so we can distribute it along the grid when we need to. I want that innovation and those jobs and that investment to be right here in the state of Texas. And I also want to make sure that we're looking out for the environment while we do. Thanks for asking. Appreciate it.
Here you go, Rick.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming to Lubbock. After 40 years of cannabis prohibition, I've been an activist. We clap and holler when we say women should have a right to choose. When will the war on adult Texas cannabis users end?
Yesterday in Canadian, I met a guy, he's a barber, he's the only barber for 50 miles around. Talks about how hard it was to get his license in the state of Texas. I think it's something that you can carry a loaded gun with no background check or vetting whatsoever, despite the number of gun deaths in Texas. But if you want to cut someone's hair, you have to jump through every hoop imaginable in this state. He said one of the complicating factors is that he's a convicted felon. And he said, you want to know when I got my conviction, what it was for? 1970, for possession of marijuana. He's still living with that on his record today. I can't tell you how many veterans I've met who say the VA will gladly prescribe me an opioid, to which I may become addicted, from which I may die, as have tens of thousands of our fellow Americans. But if I want to smoke weed because it relieves my symptoms of PTSD, I'm a criminal in the eyes of the law in the state of Texas. And what we know is that Texans of all ethnicities and races smoke pot at around the same level. And I've heard from people it is a lot at the level that people smoke. But only some Texans are more likely than other Texans to be stopped and frisked and arrested and spend life, or a lot of their life, behind bars, and upon release deal with what it's like to be a convicted felon. Disproportionately those who are paying the price for our war on drugs, as the gentleman described it, are black and brown in the state of Texas. And it costs us, the taxpayer, $500 million a year to keep them locked up for possession of a substance that is legal in most of the rest of the country right now. So as governor, we're going to legalize marijuana in the state of Texas. We're going to expunge the arrest records of anybody who has served time for possession of marijuana, including the barber in Canadian Texas. Thanks for the question.
This was going to be my last question, but this gentleman feels like he's being ignored, so we're going to let him ask his question.
Okay, great. Malachi, we had a chance to talk early on.
Yes, sir, ma'am.
How about it?
I raised my hand. She skipped over me 4 times.
She just gave you the mic, so everything's good. Everything's good.
First thing, I agree with you on a lot of things. Women's right, education, even the marijuana to an extent. Okay, but at what point are you selling us something at the cost of our Second Amendment? You're speaking all these great things that I agree with, but I'm not ready to vote my guns away. I went to the range right before this. I'm a responsible gun owner. I keep it in a safe. I never have a felony, never have any drug possessions. Why should I have to sacrifice my right to own my firearms for everybody else? No, he addressed it because people shot up at Walmart. People shot up at school, and I'm sorry about that. But why should I have to pay for that? Like, why should I have a gun? Because look at the people in Ukraine.
What's your question?
My second question. Sir, you served for this country. You served for the right for me to have this.
No, I didn't. I served for the right of this country to exist on the Constitution. You got
My second question.
Be quiet.
I respect you, sir, but let me finish my question. Second question, immigration. I believe everybody should be allowed to come here, land in the free. It's America. What are you going to do about making it easier for people to get over here without having to sneak over here and then get deported back? Because that's what breaks up families. What are you going to put in place that allows them to come over freely?
Malachi, thank you for both of these questions. And let me answer your first question. And clearly, we don't see eye to eye on issues around the Second Amendment. I hope that we can both agree that we want to defend the Second Amendment. It's in the Constitution. And just like every constitutionally protected right, it is not unlimited. The First Amendment allows for free speech, but we can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater, right? That's the example that is used over and over again. The Second amendment allows us to own firearms, but we can't own howitzers or grenade launchers. At one point in our country's history, we decided that we shouldn't be able to own machine guns. It's a matter of where we draw the line. And you and I see that line in different places. And I respect where you want to draw the line. And maybe you understand where I want to draw the line. The beauty of this form of government is that neither you nor I can impose our will on anyone else. It's going to require consensus, debate, and dialogue. And finally,
I could buy a machete at Home Depot for $30.
Please don't yell. Please
No,
wait your turn.
no,
Everybody else is waiting.
I know.
Let me answer the gentleman's question.
You understand my frustration with
Let's
the
respect
government?
him, and let's respect everybody here.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And then I'm happy to talk with you. I'll stick around and I'll talk with
Okay,
you. So,
all right.
so the second question was on immigration. And I think the gentleman's absolutely right. If you are living in another country, Mexico, for example, the Philippines, India, and you want to join a sibling that is legally immigrated here, that are now a citizen or a legal permanent resident, you are in line for more than 20 years. It provides a perverse incentive for people to try to get in front of that line or cross in between ports of entry or come to this country undocumented. If you're an asylum seeker, who, if you are to stay in Guatemala, El Salvador, or Honduras, you risk the life of your child, and you want to come here and seek asylum, but you are forced to stay in squalor in Ciudad Juarez, or Nuevo Laredo, or Tijuana, Mexico, through this Orwellian-named Migrant Protection Protocol. There's an incentive to get your kiddo to safety, because they may be kidnapped on the streets of Ciudad Juarez. So, to the spirit of your question, as governor, I want to bring you and I and the people of this state together to lead nationally on rewriting our immigration laws to reflect our values. There are so many people who want to come here for the privilege of picking the food that we eat and take for granted. They do so right now at risk of breaking the law and being deported back to their home country. What if there were an honorable guest worker program that allows somebody to earn money and they want to go back to their country because they love their country just as much as we love our country? Let's make sure there's not an incentive that keeps them from being able to do that. So on that one, I think there's a lot of common ground between the two of us. I'm grateful that you asked both of those questions, and I'm also honored that you came out here today. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so sorry if I didn't get to you. This is going to be our last question.
Hi, I have two things. I just wanted to say on the idea of supporting our teachers. I think one thing that we can all do as citizens is make sure that we're showing up at the school board meetings, because that is where our teachers are being silenced. That's where their First Amendment rights are being taken away, and our children are not allowed to learn the history that they deserve to learn. And second thing I wanted to say is I'd like to see ranked choice voting. I think that would help our systems a little bit better. And one more thing is, what also can we do to help get you in office?
I like all those questions, especially the last one. You know, sometimes people will pose this false choice before us. Do you support teachers or do you support parents? And we support all of the above. My wife Amy and I are the parents of 3 kids in public schools in El Paso. One's in elementary, one's in middle school, one's in high school. It's a very long morning as we're dropping off all these kids. We're very involved in their education. We do not miss a parent-teacher conference. We also connect with, and there are a lot of teachers here, teachers who are kind enough to share their cell phone number and say, hey, Beto, Amy, if there's an issue or a challenge, just reach out directly to me. We take them at their word, and we do that, and they reach back out to us when they have a challenge with one of our kids in the classroom. We go to school board meetings, as you just suggested. I mean, we are the government, right? The people in a democracy are the government. The government is the people. Those are our tax dollars, and those are our kids in these schools. You're right, we show up, and we make sure that our voice is heard and our opinion is counted among everyone else. So I like that a lot, and it's not incongruous with also supporting our teachers and making sure that they're treated with the respect and as the professionals that you all are and upon whom we depend. So yes, let's do that. This other question about ranked choice voting, what that means for a layman like me is that you don't go into runoffs when you have contested elections in the primary. You rank the candidates in your order of preference, and you basically avoid the cost and consequence of a runoff. And let me tell you what the consequence is. Right now, there's an incentive in our politics for one candidate to dump all over the other. and to talk horrible things about them and their supporters. In ranked choice voting, you have an incentive to attract your opponent's supporters, because if you can't be their first choice, you want to be their second choice. You certainly don't want to be their last choice. And so it encourages more civility, more compassion, and more kindness, and more focus on the issues and the policies than the ad hominem attacks that define so much of our politics. Your third question, what can we do if we care about this? And whether or not it's about the candidate or the party, we all care about this state, and we want to get on the right track in Texas. There's a website, betofortexas.com. You can sign up there. And if you do, I'll warn you, it's not just that you sign up and the job's over. We then put you to work, knocking on doors, making phone calls, reaching the millions of Texans who were eligible to vote in 2020 and 2018, but didn't cast a ballot, and who after the fact, when asked why they didn't vote, they said, no one ever knocked on my door, no one ever called me, no one ever explained to me how this works in a state that's made it harder than any other in which to vote. The only way that we overcome this is together. The only way that we make this happen is by deciding that we're going to do the work. No cavalry is going to ride to our rescue right now. This one is on all of us. And given the fact that you all showed up here on a Sunday in Lubbock, Texas, and are willing to do this work, I like our odds going forward. Thank you all for being here.